Hey everybody, last time we were talking about the Cold War, we were getting into the Korea War. We basically said this whole thing started by Korean invading on June 25th, and throughout the year, this thing quickly kind of turned around where Korea was in a lot of trouble, or South Korea was, and then MacArthur comes in, launches at Incheon, and then marches all the way up here. And I said that something major had to happen for it to go to this right here. So that's where we're really going to be focusing on at the beginning of this. One thing that we should notice from that map is that Korea looked just like, or pretty close to what it was before the war. So not a lot of land changed hands. And I said this was a victory for containment. As you can see right here, containment wins. That's the ultimate American policy when it comes to communism. Now, there is some division here between the United States military, which is led by MacArthur, and the President of the United States, which is Harry Truman at that time. Harry Truman did not want to escalate this war. When the Chinese roll in with Soviet equipped tanks and guns and start pushing our forces further south to that line, here I'll go back to it. MacArthur was going to the president and saying, give me some atomic weapons. I'm just going to drop them on China, and then I'll just go ahead and drop some on the Soviet Union. And Truman was looking at him like, hey, man, that is the craziest idea we've ever heard. And so MacArthur goes to the public and says, look, your president is a chump. He won't do anything. He won't end this war. So I can go ahead and take them all out. So just give me about 10 bombs. We'll go ahead and drop them on everybody. That was not a good thing for anybody because if he drops those bombs, then the Soviet Union is going to return by bombing us. And we did not want that. Truman didn't want that. MacArthur is sent home. He gets the hero's welcome. A lot of people thought he would run for president. Later on, he decided not to. The next person that will run for president, though, is another World War II general. That's Eisenhower. Now, when Eisenhower comes in as president, he wants to establish a policy of being really tough on communism. And so what he's going to do is basically send a bunch of destroyers off the coast of North and South Korea, which would be right in this area right here. And he makes it pretty public. Look, these destroyers have planes on them that have nuclear weapons. If you do not work out a deal and go ahead and ink out some kind of a peace policy, we might have to use them. And so these two countries get together, they work out a deal, they establish this famous DMZ line. And this DMZ line is not a very good place to go for over 100,000 different reasons. And those different reasons all have one thing in common: landmines. Now, you can travel from South Korea to North Korea through one road that has no landmines on it, but they do have plenty of machine gun turrets. And they do not allow people from North Korea to travel to South Korea, and people from South Korea are not allowed to travel to North Korea. It still kind of works out this way today. Now, after this war is over, we can clearly see our military spending. It costs us a lot of money to endure any war. And we're just going to keep on ramping it up, ramping it up. Matter of fact, Eisenhower became very concerned about that towards the end of his presidency. So we got our first question here. How did the American public view MacArthur after President Truman fired him? I just said he got the hero's welcome. So that's going to be A. You'll see that question on your next test. Next question. We'll go ahead and get to it. We just saw that from the last thing we were talking about. Military spending will increase and it becomes a huge part of our budget because we're trying to develop better weapons than anybody else. As you can see, this question was already answered. It's going to be Korea. That's where we've been talking about this whole entire time since we've been in the video. As we've already alluded to, our next president was Eisenhower. We already know he established himself as a very famous general in World War II. He pretty much planned out the invasion of Germany, and as he comes to run for president, strong candidate, no political background, but during World War II, he really was poisoning himself to become a political person. He knew how to work those ranks between him, the British, the French, and even the Soviet Union. And so he comes out with this very famous badge. It says, I like Ike. Ike is pretty much his nickname. And so he's the first Republican president that we see since President Herbert Hoover, who was the first president during the Great Depression. Now, we've already stated that the Republicans really wanted a tough stance on communism. And he's going to do that. He's going to do a lot of things that will going to be really tough on communism. Now, Eisenhower, as we were mentioning in World War II when we were talking about him, this guy really didn't see any battle. He was always behind the lines. He was always doing stuff behind the scenes. He's going to use the same tactic when it comes to American policy, whether it be foreign or domestic. It's called the silent hand. So if he wants something done, he's going to go get somebody else to do it for him. And he's going to guide them. And in the end, his name kind of stays out of it, but he's really the driving force in getting it done. One prime example of that is during the civil rights movement, we have a group of African American students wanting to go to school in Little Rock, Arkansas. That was known as the Little Rock Nine. And he basically gets he gets those kids to go to school, um, even though he kind of stays out of it. So he's going to do this through his entire presidency. He would rarely step in and say, this is the way it's going to be himself. He only did that when he had to. Now, we were talking about his foreign policy of trying to be tough on somebody. And this is known as brinkmanship. And here's what I want you to think of when you think of brinkmanship. Think of like you got two bullies. These two bullies don't want to fight each other. The bullies are going to be the United States and the Soviet Union. And he's going to try to push around the Soviet Union as much as he can. However, though, he sees the bully starting to get mad or maybe starting to react in any type of way, he's going to kind of back off because he doesn't want any type of nuclear retaliation. Just think of it as kind of like you got your younger brother, younger sister, you're kind of sitting over there bullying them and playing around with them, and just all of a sudden you see that they draw back their hand, and you're just like, oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. He's going to set up another doctrine pretty much just like what Truman set up, known as the Eisenhower Doctrine. Does the exact same thing that the Truman Doctrine did. If you guys need money, any type of military assistance, or anything like that, we will help you out. One key area in which the Eisenhower Doctrine works out is in Egypt. There's an area there known as the Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea pretty much to the Indian Ocean, which allows travel so much quicker. And the communists were trying to fight for it, and there were kind of like some kind of a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And Eisenhower sends in some troops, sends in some money and weapons, but lastly, troops to ensure that it stays very nationalistic. So, John Foster Dulles, Eisenhower's Secretary of State, is going to promote that policy of brinkmanship. So let's go ahead and get to our favorite brand new bald guy, Nikita Khrushchev. Y'all should practice on saying that. Well, mysteriously, Stalin, he died. Probably his life could have been saved because, his one simple rule, which we were talking about in class, where do not ever come into my room. Well, the guy didn't show up for breakfast, and we're like, well, we can't go into his room because if we do, he's going to shoot us or have somebody shoot us. So Stalin winds up dying in the process. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories about how Stalin died. Check them out when you can. So this new guy comes in. He made himself very famous during World War II, especially during the Battle of Stalingrad. He's one of the famous generals during it. And he comes in, replaces Stalin. However, though, people thought maybe this Cold War will be over because he wasn't nearly as suspicious. He wasn't nearly as cruel. And boy, they were wrong because he did not like capitalism at all. He wanted to destroy the United States. Matter of fact, he's at a very famous United Nations conference. The guy's got center stage, talking on the podium, unties his shoe, takes it off, beats it on the podium, and yells at the United States, "We will destroy you." Matter of fact, that famous speech inspired the producers of Rocky IV and the director to pretty much make sure that Drago, when he's fighting Rocky in Rocky IV, to go ahead and say, "I will break you," because he does say that as well. Now, when he comes in, he's going to notice that the Soviet Union is really lacking and really behind weapons development. So he's really going to focus on that. And anybody who tried to rebel against him was crushed as well. Because remember, we had those satellite states that were in the Soviet Union. A lot of them said, "We don't really want to be here." And they thought that they might get out. And as soon as they started to rebel against Khrushchev, he pretty much goes in there and bombs the crap out of them. That's why you see all those bombs going off behind them in that picture. All right, so how was Khrushchev different from Stalin? We just said he wasn't nearly as cruel or suspicious. And so that brings us to our arms race. Now, both sides are really pushing for who's going to get the bigger bomb, who's going to have the best bombs, everything like that. Now, right here, we got a very famous picture. This is known as Mike. Mike was the first megaton hydrogen bomb. Now, Mike was pretty much set up on the Marshall Islands, which is in the Pacific Ocean. And it's a set of three little islands in that area where Mike went off. You can see one right here, and then you got the other one as back there, and then you got this one right here, and there's another one that you can't see in the picture. When this bomb went off, it was so huge, and you can go watch the videos of it. Yeah, it pretty much evaporated those islands. They are no longer there. You cannot go to them because it blew everything out of the water, or into the water, actually. We've got another bomb here. This is known as the Tsar bomb. This is the largest bomb ever to be detonated in the history of mankind. This thing right here made this one look like a little baby. That's how huge it was. So the Soviets are having a huge problem because their bombs aren't nearly as accurate. And so they're like, "Look, we can't have accuracy. We'll just have, a bigger bomb. This way it'll destroy everything and then whatever else." And so the United States have more accurate bombs. A lot of people are going to try to figure out how in the world can they build smaller bombs that are bigger in terms of explosion. Because this bomb right here, you can see this whole entire string right here was nothing more than a power station feeding it. Uh, so people were like, "How can we make them so small?" Today we've got bombs that are small that can fit in a suitcase. We got ICBMs. These are or missiles that actually can deliver these atomic weapons from another continent. We have them. We can't shoot ours nearly as far as what the Soviets could. But like I said, we were more accurate with them. Now, a brand new thing's going to come around. That's going to be nuclear submarines. They run off of nuclear power and they also carry nuclear weapons. We developed pretty much the first successful one, and then the Soviets have one. There's a very good movie called K-19 Widowmaker about the Soviets when they build theirs and they really rush it. And a lot of the guys that were on that submarine wound up dying from nuclear poisoning or radiation poisoning, I should say. And then we've got a very famous picture of Sputnik. This is not Sputnik. This is Sputnik 2. Sputnik, or hold my bad, Sputnik 3. Sputnik was nothing more than a ship probably about the size of a basketball. And they launched it into space and went around, went beep, 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 and that was it. And when they eventually launched Sputnik 3, which is with this one, they do retrieve dogs, so don't feel bad about that. That's really going to cause the United States to go into a lot of panic. We're going to have a space race, and that leads to the United States increasing study in math and science. Now, the last thing that we're going to have is the CIA. We're going to spy on them. They're going to spy on us. It's just going to be that way for the next while. Matter of fact, if you're really mad about your science class and your math class, blame Sputnik. Daggone Russians.